Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast. I am McKee, and on this edition, this Wednesday, September 24th edition of the podcast, I'm joined by my great friend Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider. It is officially basketball season as of Tuesday, which Ryan and I do not consider it just basketball season right now. We call it multi-sport season right now because obviously we've got football, big week with Mississippi State on deck this Saturday. Tennessee baseball gets going with its fall tomorrow. Basketball is officially underway, so this is going to be a basketball podcast. But Ryan, I don't know that we ever referred to it as basketball season until really football ends. It's multi-sport season for us.
Yeah, like you said, football ends and fall baseball has ended. So you do get, I don't know, 2 months, I guess, depending on how good the football season is, a month to 2 months of just basketball. But yeah, I feel like just about every year it falls where that 6 weeks out from when basketball season starts and practice officially starts is usually when fall baseball rolls around too. So you get both those revved up here in late September, and certainly, like you said, we'll be focusing on basketball today and plenty of good stuff with them, but should be a pretty interesting fall for fall baseball as well.
But it is absolutely basketball season, and make no bones about that, even if I do like to mention it being multi-sport season because of how compelling and intriguing and entertaining all three male sports are for Tennessee right now. Tennessee fans are very lucky, especially when you look across the landscape at Dabo Sweeney and Mike Gundy, and there's certainly examples of, hey, we're not getting on here talking about Rick Barnes retiring the day before the start of preseason practice. I guess maybe we should start there. I did not have that in my notes. Shame on me. But what was your reaction to Bruce Pearl's decision? I don't think anybody was surprised by his decision. I think more of the conversation is just kind of when it happened and who is taking over.
Yeah, I think one, the immediate thing was surprised that he wasn't running for Senate because it felt like that was a strong possibility. So for him to retire and he'd gone on Rothstein's podcast like a month ago and was like, I don't think I'm gonna be coaching that much longer. So he was kind of telling us a little bit about it. And yeah, then you think, okay, well, leave now gives Steven a chance with a team that should be pretty good to go out there and earn the job. And that was kind of my first thought. I was like, what's the worst Steven Pearl can do this year and get the job full time? Uh, and then, yeah, 5-year contract right off the bat. So that was probably the thing that jumped out to me the most. I was pretty surprised that they went ahead and gave him the 5-year contract because, from what I had heard, Bruce had been trying to push in the past couple of years for like a coach and waiting type position for him. And Auburn was, John Cohen, AD, was unwilling to do that. So I was surprised that when push came to shove, he was willing to give him the job.
Yeah, that was the big surprise to me as well. I just look, I don't have a problem with Steven Pearl being named the head coach. I know the whole conversation about nepotism was involved, and quite honestly, that part did not bother me. I realize that nepotism is a real thing, and it's not that. It's just I think when it's not like Steven was hired off of the couch,
Yeah,
or something along those lines. He had been in the program for quite some time. He played college basketball at a high level, has coached at a high level the last 11 years. It's not like Rick Barnes hiring his son, who Rick Barnes' son has no experience coaching whatsoever. That's when that would become a problem. But I thought it would be a short term prove it type of deal. I was surprised by the 5 years, and I don't know. I'm curious to see how Auburn fans kind of end up feeling about that, because if Bruce Pearl had just wrapped up the most historic run in Tennessee or in Auburn basketball history and has now set these standards for Auburn basketball, and now they have the resources that they have at Auburn to continue to, I'm not going to say make the Final Four, because that is an unrealistic standard, I think, just because of how difficult it is to get to the Final Four. Just look at Tennessee basketball, right? Never making one. But to consistently be in the mix and give yourself a shot every March to make a Sweet 16, Elite 8 run, and every now and then maybe the breaks fall your way and you find the Final Four with those expectations and resources. I just don't know that Steven Pearl excites me, quite honestly, if I were an Auburn fan. But I guess on the flip side of that, maybe they look at it as, well, he knows what's been working, and he does have those resources that I just got done talking about, and it's not like they're going to have to do a total reset with the roster. But I don't know. I'm fascinated to see how that works out, because I think Steven's going to have to do some changing. I think his temperament on the sideline is going to have to change, and I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think to your point about the nepotism, like whether it's Bruce Pearl's son or not, like just any assistant coach who has never been a head coach, there's going to be the uncertainty. And to your point, Auburn coming off the Final Four, coming off a really good run, and it feels like the commitment level to basketball is pretty high on the Plains right now. If you had removed that and you were going to make you're going to have a full national search, the job's I would think a pretty attractive one, and you would be targeting a sitting head coach somewhere. But that's doesn't mean it can't work out for an assistant coach. Assistant coaches perform well in first time head coaching opportunities. It's just a level of risk and unknown there that you don't have if you go hire a sitting head coach.
Yeah, and we also probably look at it from a much different perspective, because we know the Stephen Pearl at Tennessee side of things. Like, we've always known Stephen Pearl,
Yeah.
well before he was even kind of positioned as this top assistant or head coach in waiting at Auburn. We were well aware kind of Stephen's quirks before he was ever put in this position. So maybe that's why I have the thoughts that I do, and not to suggest that like I know Stephen or anything like that. And when he was playing at Tennessee, I was in middle school, so it's not like I it's not like I had a relationship with him or anything. But I work with people who worked with him and know people and have friends of his, and so you kind of hear things, and it's not anything bad. It's just, I don't know. I think it goes back to just the temperament on the sideline, and that's well documented with that whole Auburn program, quite frankly. So it's a little bit different from our perspective because of how close the Bruce Pearl to Tennessee connection is the point that I'm getting at. But certainly intrigued to see how that works out. And as you mentioned, not at all surprised to see Bruce retire, because he had been hinting at it and did not really shy away from it in multiple interviews the last couple of months. I think the more surprising thing with Bruce was his decision to not run for any type of public office or get into politics because of how outspoken he is on social media. So it'll certainly be an interesting storyline to follow the next couple of months and beyond. We are here to talk about Tennessee basketball, not Auburn basketball, but obviously Bruce applies to Tennessee and Auburn. I think, Ryan, Auburn and Tennessee have been the two standards of SEC basketball the last decade since Rick and Bruce took over at their schools. So it's certainly massive SEC basketball news that we needed to discuss off the top. You got to watch Tennessee basketball practice yesterday. We'll touch on some injuries first. Seems like a pretty healthy Tennessee basketball bunch right now, especially given how guys were in and out of the lineup throughout the summer. JP Estrella seems to kind of be dealing with an ankle turn from a couple of weeks ago, but sounds like he was basically full go during Tuesday's practice, and then Amari Evans a little banged up. What did you see from those two guys during Tennessee's first official practice of the season on Tuesday?
Yeah, JP was out there basically full go for the first. We didn't get to watch we probably watched an hour and a half yesterday, which I think was just a one-time thing of us not getting to watch the full thing. But he was basically full go, and then he took a little bit of a tumble later in the parts of practice we watched, and then he was back working with Garrett Mendenwald, the strength and conditioning coach, just kind of working on something in the weight room. So, I don't think anything serious there. Rick Barnes had said he rolled his ankle a couple of weeks ago. I think there was a little bit of extra tape on it, but it was no sort of heavy casting or anything like that. And he was doing everything everybody else was, going up and down the court 5-on-5. So he was active, and then Amari Evans was off to the side basically the whole time. As Ben, a lot of times they'll be doing stuff in half court, and an injured player is getting shots up on the other side, and it was kind of that, and working on some other things. So I think again, kind of like a lower leg, foot, ankle type thing with Amari Evans, and he's a guy that, like I'm sure we'll talk about, basically anybody that's a shooting guard or an off ball guard on this roster is going to have opportunities to earn playing time this year. But Evans has just been really banged up, kind of on and off. Had the concussion protocol back in July. I had a minor ankle thing back in June. So certainly for a freshman who's hoping and looking to earn a role, he's had a lot of adversity here in his first couple months on campus.
Has that tempered your expectations for how much he plays this season? Because for me, it has. When he signed, I looked at him from a defensive standpoint and thought, okay, Amari can probably play as a true freshman. I mean, he's arguably, depending on who you talk to, might be the best wing defender in this high school class. I mean, he can play right away, especially knowing Rick would want to put that on the court
Yeah.
if he's ready. But I think with the injuries and just kind of him being no major injuries as you just detailed, but just not enough practice time has kind of tempered my expectations for his playing time this season.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, my opinion's kind of been that, like, there's going to be once they get into the thick of it, obviously early in the season, most everybody's going to play. But once they get into the thick of it, there's going to be minutes for one of Amari Evans and Bishop Boswell, kind of as that defensive stopper. And so certainly Bishop being one of the guys that, I guess 4 guys that's back, that's been in the program, a familiarity level. I think you see those two things kind of diverging with Amari being banged up. But I would say at the same time, I don't necessarily feel like, from what I've watched and what I've heard, Bishop Boswell is just taking things and run with it this offseason either, and where he's created some sort of just a ton of separation from Amari or anything like that either. So I would say it's been tempered, but not to the extent where I'm just like saying, yeah, it's let's revisit things and next offseason and see what his role could be for this team next year.
Yeah, I don't at all mean to suggest that there's no possibility that he does do what I think he could, and that's get on the floor because of his defense. I just don't know that it's going to be early in the season. Those Jemai Meshack defensive minutes that Jemai earned when he was an underclassman, I just see those going to Bishop right now because, yes, Bishop does not seem to be where they would like for him to be offensively, but I think defensively he can get in there and more than hold his own at this point.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point, I mean, Tennessee, it was Devontae Gaines kind of had that role before Jemai. Rick seems to like that spark guy off the bench, even if that defensive player is not, didn't become what Jemai was his last couple of years, where you just could trust him out there to play 20, 25 minutes a game. Even if it's not that, Rick seems to like to have a guy to go to for 5 to 10 minutes a night, or maybe just in a 2-minute spurt in a certain game to try to give some sort of energy boost on the defensive end off the bench.
What was your biggest takeaway, injuries aside, from watching the guys for the first time in several weeks yesterday?
Yeah, I think just naturally, I'll say 10 on 2 things. Naturally, my eyes were just on Ethan Berg and Clarence Masamba, because that was their first chance getting to watch them since they've arrived on campus. And, I think Berg especially, it's only been 2 weeks since he's been on campus, and he looked like a guy that it was all kind of new to. I think at one point they were, kind of doing 3-on-3, transition shooting, where you're trying to run transition break and everybody's getting a shot at the end of it. And he was basically running the point guard spot on it. And Rick Barnes was getting onto him to throw a pass to the block. He's like, you got to throw it to the block. And Ethan Berg didn't know what he's talking about, because I can't remember what he said it was. They call the block something different in Europe. And so they pointed it out to him. He's like, oh, so-and-so. So it's kind of some stuff like that where it's just like, it's clear and it's an adjustment to him right now. The American game, I thought the athleticism and physicality gave him some issues at times offensively, but shot the ball generally pretty well. He had one really nice drive and finish over Felix Okpara, which obviously we know very difficult to finish over him. And I think maybe a weird dichotomy to what I just said about the athleticism and physicality giving him some issues. I thought he more than held his own defensively. Like he talked to the media before the practice, and I asked him, just to tell us about his game, and he said, I feel like I'm a really good defender. And I don't know, I didn't like scoff at it or anything, but I didn't really buy into it much. Maybe that's just because the the Euro League, what you typically think about that, and then what you typically think about the standard of defense in Rick Barnes' program. But I thought he looked pretty good on that end. So that was my thoughts on him. Masamba, and I'll just be really interested to see what he looks like whenever we watch him again in a couple weeks, and he's got a little bit more under his belt. And then Masamba is clearly a very good athlete. I think that stuff that we knew about him with his length and athleticism was very true. He just he looks like a younger player. He looks like someone that is a true freshman that got here in August and didn't go through things in the summer and still learning. So I would say, I continue to think Berg has a really good chance to help this team. Masamba, I'd be a little bit more surprised if he earns a major role this year, but that's just a little bit of preconceived notions and what I saw from one practice. So those guys, and then we mentioned JP Estrella. I thought he had another nice day. I continue to be really impressed by the improvements he's made in his game over a year in which he's mostly been rehabbing a foot injury. I mean, that was one of the things people inside the program were saying, how much work over the summer. I think he was the only one on the team that didn't go home in the May mini term and stayed to work. And it's clear it's been a big point of emphasis for him. And, I think I'd said it at times where like you looked at it and you thought, all right, his junior year should be the year where he breaks out and has a really big season. But losing so much time with injury, I just wondered how much that would stunt his growth and stunt him, maybe being a year behind. And, I'm sure he's not as good as a player right now as he would have been had he been able to play all last year and been fully healthy. But I also don't think that injury stunted his growth in the way that I thought it might.
Ethan Berg ties into my top storyline that I'm paying attention to this preseason. I'm curious if you feel the same way as I do, and we'll discuss that on the other side of this quick timeout here on the GoVols247 Podcast. Welcome back into the GoVols247 Podcast. I am Ben McKee, and I'm joined by Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider on this Wednesday, September 24th edition of the GoVols247 Podcast, talking Tennessee basketball because we are about 5 weeks out from its sold-out exhibition against Duke. They officially began practice on Tuesday, so wanted to jump on here and give a bit of a preseason preview as they get going. Before we jump back into our conversation, I do need to encourage you, if you wouldn't mind going in and leaving us a review wherever you find your GoVols247 podcast, that can help us in a major, major way. And if you haven't found us on YouTube yet, we are now on YouTube. You can see my pretty face. You can see Ryan Shumpert's prettier face by going and finding us at GoVols247 on YouTube if you haven't already, and hitting that subscribe button. Schumpert, I mentioned that Ethan Berg ties into my top storyline or the top storyline that I'm paying attention to this preseason, and that's just who starts at the 2. And I think it's pretty obvious that it's Ethan Berg or Amari Abram, the Louisiana Tech transfer. Do you also think it's very obvious it's one of those two that starts at the 2, because Jacoby Gillespie is going to start at point guard? I don't know if people realize this, but Nate Ament is going to be the starting 3. I know like recruiting profiles had him as a power forward, but he is a wing. He is a true 3. Anytime that I have been there, of course, I haven't been able to be around as much of late, but in the summer, I mean, it seemed like he was only working at the 3. I'm sure he's maybe slid down to the 4 a time or two when they experiment here and there, but he is a true 3 and going to be a 3 90-something% of the time he is on the floor, I would guess. And I don't know that people really realize that. I think they kind of view him as a post player, but he is a true wing. So you've got Nate at the 3, you've got Gillespie at the 1. To me, the question is who starts at the 2, and it's either Amari Abram or Ethan Berg. Do you agree with that? And who would you give the leg up to here at the start of practice?
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. I think it'll clearly be one of those guys. I would probably give the leg up at this time to Amari Abram. And some of that's just like the head start aspect of it. He's been here since the start of June. He has played 3 years of college basketball, including 1 in the SEC at Ole Miss. So there's just, I think, a little bit more of a comfort level and an experience experience aspect for him. But that's also, as you said, 5 weeks or so before 4.5 weeks before Duke. Once Ethan Berg, 2 weeks into Ethan Berg being on campus, I think Ethan Berg will get a lot better, and I think maybe has a little bit more juice to his game, like a higher ceiling that he could get to than Abram. I think the thing that stood out to me about Abram and talking to some people is just how steady he is. Like, I don't know if there's been a day where he has been the best player on the court, or maybe the second best player on the court at practice, but he just doesn't have quite the up and downs. He's just real solid. I think he understands what Tennessee needs from him, and you continually hear that he's been really good just as a catch and shoot shooter. And when you talk about having Jacoby Gillespie and Nate Ament, who are two guys that I think not only have all SEC but all American potential, and a front court I think is going to be pretty darn good too. Like Tennessee's just not going to be asking a ton from that 2 guard spot, so I would lean there. And to your point about Nate Ament, I mean, I would even go a step further. I think he will play more minutes at the 2 this year than he will play minutes at the 4, which some of that's just roster based. You know, they're searching for answers at 2, and I think they have a lot of depth in the front court, and they've been experienced with Cade experimenting with Cade at the 3. So, to me, that's the biggest question, and I would give Abram the lean or the nod right now, but still a lot of time to go before they tip things off, and all the more time to go before they get into the SEC games that really, really matter.
Yeah, I would say here on September 24th, Amari Abram, that is your starting 2 guard. But I kind of think the higher ceiling is with Ethan, if he can reach the point of where he is comfortable within the system and adjusting fine, kind of those bullet points we talked about in the first segment. I also kind of view Amari Abram as just the perfect spark plug off the bench. I mean, he is what you just described is exactly what you want coming off the bench, a guy that is going to come in and play great defense. Every time I've been there this summer, he was glued to whoever he was defending. I mean, he's just like an Energizer bunny on defense, constantly running around, constantly on the hip of the guy he's defending. Then, as you mentioned, he's a pretty steady shooter as well, and I just think that's the perfect thing coming off the bench, perfect spark plug off the bench. So I am very curious to see how that plays out. Is that your top preseason storyline that you're paying attention to, or would you go in a different direction?
Yeah, I think that's my top one, just because, I mean, that's been since, I guess, Ronnie Rice went to USC. That's been the big question about this team is who are they going to find at the 2 guard spot, and it was already kind of a weak portal 2 guard portal cycle, and I think they did kind of what they should have done, which was go out and get a lot of different options and hope something sticks. So yeah, I would agree that's it. I do think. And I think the reason I would say that more than this is just because I think this next aspect will get figured out more when the games get started. But what does that front court rotation look like? What guys do they feel comfortable? What combination of guys do they feel comfortable playing together? And then I think that ties into too how much will Cade play the 3? I mean, that was the thing at yesterday's practice when they were split up early in practice, and it was guards/wings on one end and big men at the other working on post drills. Cade was over there working with the wings, going against Nate Ament. And then once Tennessee got to running, 5v5, it was kind of what you'd expect. He was bouncing around, playing some 4 and playing some 3 as well. So I think that aspect with Cade of where he's going to play most, combined with does Tennessee want to play Felix and JP together? Do they feel comfortable playing Jalen Carey at the 5 in certain lineups? And then Dwayne Brown, who I think continues to make things a little messier just because how solid he's been and potentially pushing for some playing time. All that would probably be my next thing, what minutes and what positions and combinations look like. But again, when it comes to a preseason practice aspect, I feel like we'll figure more of that stuff out once the games actually get rolling.
That is one of my next top things I'm paying attention to these next several weeks. Number 2 is, can JP Estrella stay healthy, which ties into what you are talking about, because I truly believe he has all SEC potential, and I kind of think that Tennessee fans, because he has not been able to stay healthy, don't quite realize what they have with JP. I mean, JP can be a difference maker because of his athleticism, his touch. He's just a really good basketball player, and unfortunately, he has not been able to stay healthy. And it seems more to be about fluky injuries, not him being like injury prone or anything. I think the foot injury is just bad luck. Turning your ankle, that's bad luck in basketball. That happens all the time in basketball, right? Can JP stay healthy? Because I think he's somebody who has all SEC type potential and can be a real difference maker for Tennessee, but he's got to stay on the floor, and he's got to be able to not only stay on the floor just for the simple fact of being able to play, but he's got to develop on the floor as well. He's not played a ton of basketball. I mean, 3 games last year, didn't play much as a true freshman until he was thrown in the fire against Zach Edey and more than held his own in Detroit. Memphis Grizzlies, great Zach Edey, I might add. But yeah, that's kind of number 2 for me, and that ties into what you were talking about with the front court, because I am fascinated to see how that rotation pans out. I do think that I kind of think that Rick's going to end up being comfortable playing those guys in pretty much any rotation lineup that he wants. I think he's going to feel comfortable with JP and Felix on the floor together, with Jalen and whoever on the floor together, Cade doing whatever, because I think the front court has a lot of versatility, and I think it's why it's going to prove to be the best front court in the SEC this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you just said about Felix and JP is probably the biggest question because I think those are probably their two best guys in the front court. So two guys that you think of traditionally as centers, can they play together? And yeah, I mean, JP just gives a different look. I mean, I think that's the thing I would say that's good about that group as a whole is all the guys give a different type of look. But JP has an offensive bag and offensive game that nobody else in that group has. That Tennessee hasn't had since like that 10-game stretch for John Fulkerson in 2019, 2020. Like they haven't had a guy that you can really throw the ball down to in the post and expect a basket at any consistency. I mean, Euros was good for like 2 turning left shoulders, baby hooks a game,
He'd
but
have a game here and there.
yeah, but he wasn't going to be a consistent guy with a bunch of different things he could go to.
Olivier's the closest thing that you've had to somebody that you could consistently rely on, but even his big bugaboo was that he could not he was not consistent.
Yes, exactly. So that's I think when you just talk about the potential of this team, and I think a big question as a whole is I like the depth of this team a lot. I like I like the front court and the different looks they can throw at people. But I think just as a whole, it's like who's going to score a lot besides Jacoby Gillespie and Nate Mitt? And I think JP, if healthy, is that natural guy you would point to as being, a third potential double digits type scorer on this team.
Yeah, and on the Cade front, before we wrap up with a couple other quick bullet points, I think in terms of Cade playing the 3, I think that more than works defensively. And
Yeah.
I think they're going to be able to throw out some freaky lineups with – I didn't even think about Nate playing the 2 with Cade at the 3 until you kind of mentioned it early in the podcast. But, I mean, you could potentially have like a defensive lineup of Akpara at the 5, Jalen Carey, who's an absolute bulldozer at the 4, Cade at the 3, Nate at the 2. I mean, opposing head coaches are already turning over in their sleep thinking about having to score against that defensive lineup. I think the thing with Cade at the 3 is more about his offensive game and how it fits in from that standpoint. But, I mean, if he's surrounded by Nate and Jacoby and who knows what Felix or JP or Jalen are doing in the front court, like I don't know that you necessarily need Cade's offense. I think he's a capable shooter. I think he's going to be able to prove that, but that is going to have to be something that he does prove, and that will probably dictate maybe how much he does play at the 3, at least from an offensive standpoint. But maybe you're afforded to keep him at the 3 longer than you typically would if his offense doesn't prove itself, because I think there might be enough offense around him to allow that lineup to survive.
Yeah, I mean, the shooting's the question there with Cade. And I mean, really, the shooting in large part is the question with the team. If we feel like they're going to play more 2 big lineups than they have in a number of years, can any of those guys, one, stretch out to 15 feet and make opponents worry about that? And then 2, can any of them hit 3-pointers with any sort of consistency? It doesn't. Alex Condon is the kind of the model there that I would point to. I think Alex Condon made like 30 to 35 threes last year at a 30% clip. Like, can anybody do something in that range? Because I think that would go a long way into spacing the court, and that was especially the issue if you're going to play Cade at the 3 and you're going to play any combination of guys in the front court. What the joke I've been making when we've seen them practice that lineup is like, to me, that turns into it kind of turns into like, and this is an ugly comparison, it kind of turns into like what Texas A&M's offense looks like the last 2 years, but instead of just Wade Taylor shooting it, you have Jacoby Gillespie or Nate Mitt playing one-on-one, and everybody else just 3 strong side defensive ends going to assault people at the glass. Because I mean, that would be an elite rebounding lineup, and I do think this is going to be a really good rebounding team. But certainly the spacing it would be the big issue with that lineup from an offensive standpoint. They could be really, 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 really solid defensively, and then I don't think any doubt about it would be pretty elite on the glass.
How concerned are you with the backup point guard spot? Because just in terms of listing, if we were to list a depth chart just solely based on the true position of the player, Troy Henderson is your backup point guard. And I think he's going to be more than serviceable as a true freshman, especially considering what his ranking was at the time he committed. Tennessee's going to get more juice out of that orange than it realized, I think, at the time he committed. I know the Zakai Ziegler comparisons are going to be easy and probably made quite often. But I do think Troy Henderson is going to be more than serviceable as a true freshman. But you still don't necessarily want that to be the backup to Jacoby Gillespie, I don't think. But I'm not as concerned with that spot because I think Nate Ament is going to handle the ball a lot. I think in a pinch, Jacoby's going to play a ton, assuming he's healthy. So you're not going to have to cover theoretically a ton of minutes at point guard, but I think when you do have to cover the minutes here and there, I think even though you only have one true point guard on the roster, you have guys like Ethan Berg and Nate Ament who I think are going to be more than capable of holding their own in that regard.
Yeah, I'm not really worried about it, and I think it's twofold. Like, sure, I mean, just look at the past couple of years. Like, sure, it'd have been nice to add for Tennessee to add a second guy that could play off the ball while also handling the ball effectively to play with Zakai, but it's just like, I think I see it the same way. It's like when push comes to shove in these games that really matter, Jacoby Gillespie is going to be playing 37 minutes, 38 minutes, like Zakai was. So it was going to be hard to truly go out there and find somebody that is a capable backup point guard, not backup quarterback, backup point guard.
Multi-sport season, baby.
that was going to embrace a role like that. And then second, aspect of it is I am high on Troy Henderson. I do like him a lot, and think he can. Again, it's not going to. I don't think it's going to look like Zakai's freshman year did, where he truly became a 6-man type situation and played 20 minutes a night by the end of the season. I don't think that, but I am high on what he can do to help this team, and I think that gives some interesting wrinkles too of being able to play a little bit like Zakai and Kennedy did that year, where you have two guys on the court that can handle the basketball. And Jacoby is, even though he's impressed me getting to the rim more than, he has more of that to his game than I thought he did. At the end of the day, I think his best strength is still his shooting. And if Tennessee can find, whether it be Troy Henderson or Ethan Berg or Bishop Boswell to be consistent enough handling the basketball, and you can play Jacoby some of the two and have him running off some of those floppy screens and pin downs like they did with Chaz Lanier last year to get open shots, I think that just makes Tennessee all the more dangerous as an offensive team.
And Bishop's another guy I should have mentioned when talking about guys who can handle the basketball for a minute or two if Jacoby needs to go to the bench. And I certainly think Bishop is capable of having an impact defensively this season. It's just a matter of where is he at offensively, and he played point guard in high school. He can handle the basketball or should be able to in year two. So a big year for Bishop in that regard as well. But he does give Tennessee another ball handler in a pinch that I should have mentioned for sure. Ryan, you obviously do a great job of covering the team, and there will be plenty of content in the coming weeks. Where can people find you and your work and your coverage of Tennessee basketball?
Yeah, you can find me at Twitter at rschump00, RSCHUMP00, and then also at Rocky Top Insider on all socials and RockyTopInsider.com, really the place to go, and just click on that basketball tab. It'll be plenty of stuff, and shout out to Ryan Sylvia aboard now. Is doing an awesome job covering Lady Vols. He got to watch a little bit of the Lady Vols practice on Tuesday, and had plenty of coverage on Kim Caldwell's press conference and stuff like that. So plenty of good hoops coverage both on the men's and women's side over at RTI.
Well, we greatly appreciate you joining us, especially here on an early Wednesday morning.
Yeah, happy to make it work, and yeah, it's a good start to the day talking a little Tennessee hoops.
That's right. And my kids are running around upstairs, so hopefully that did not come through on the audio too much. I apologize if it did throughout the podcast, but greatly appreciate Ryan joining us. And for Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider, I'm Ben McKee of GoVols247. This has been another edition of the GoVols247 Podcast.